From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
From Sunburst Media Productions and Refuge Productions, this is Spectrum 360. Welcome. Your Spectrum 360 co-hosts are Mark Skogman and Bruce Wright. Spectrum 360 broadcasts live weekly on Mondays at 11 p.m. and online anytime via podcast. Thank you for listening for the next hour. Spectrum 360 is progressive and features political talk and humor and also the arts and popular culture. Spectrum 360 starts right now. Let's get to work.
Not in the dark, not on a train, not in a car, not in a tree. I do not like them, Sam, you see. Not in a house, not on a box, in a box. Not with a mouse, not with a fox. I will not eat them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. You do not like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam, I am.
Yes, that was the inimitable U.S. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. Hello, this is radio program Spectrum 360 for Monday, the 7th of October, 2013. Welcome. This is Mark Skogman.
And this is Bruce Wright.
Yes, and let's get right to the program preview. We've got a great program for you. The staff of Spectrum 360 has been working very, very hard for you, let me tell you, okay? So we definitely want to make sure that you listen to the program. It's a good one. It's a very good one. Okay. The segment one is going to be an interview via telephone with Diop Olagbala. He's the president of the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement about an apparent racial profiling incident. We will be speaking about that in depth on the first half of the program. After that, we're going to have a short segment about the new film, Inequality for All. I was able to see the film over this last weekend on Friday evening at the Burns Court Cinema in Sarasota. It's a great film. We'll be talking about that. In the second half of the program, we're going to have an interview with my friend, disbarred lawyer and political activist Mark Adams about election integrity, election reform, foreclosure fraud, etc. Coming to you from this last weekend's actually, Florida Unity in Action Summit Conference in Shady Hills, Florida. And also, to finish the program, we are going to have another installment, another segment of the John Nichols series. We're doing a four-part series of a speech by John Nichols on in this year, August 10th, Saturday, when he spoke to the Wisconsin Progressive Democrats of America in Madison, Wisconsin. We're going to do part 3 of 4. Next week, we'll have part 4 of 4. So, that's the program for this evening. Is our guest called in yet? Our first guest? Nope, not yet. Okay, we're still waiting for our first guest to call in. So I do want to just talk a little bit about the film, the great film, Inequality for All. Now, this film, it also includes, it actually features Robert Reich. Robert Reich is a Rhodes Scholar, a friend of Bill Clinton's, an official who worked in the Ford, Carter, and Clinton administrations, and under the first Clinton administration was also the first Secretary of Labor. Also, we have some acknowledgments coming up soon.
Yes, we'd like to thank the following people for continuous support for the show itself, for Spectrum 360. And just to remind everyone, you can check us out on the web at www.tantalk1340.com. And there's also a podcast of the show that'll be up after the show. But we'd like to thank the following organizations. The Refuge, that can be reached at 727-278-1547. The Poor People's Economic Human Rights, and they're at economichumanrights.org. Next week, we will be having Sherry Honkel on to talk about the World Court of Women, which I'll be giving you a little press release about that before the end of the show.
Sherry Honk-ala? Does that come with sound effects?
Yeah, exactly. Sherry was also the former vice presidential candidate for the Green Party and is part of the Green Shadow Cabinet, of which I'm also a part of. And, of course, we'd like to thank Veterans for Peace, Chapter 119, and Gennaro's Coffee House, 1047 Central Avenue. You can call them at 727-202-6956. Every Monday night they show documentary films with St. Pete for Peace. And every Saturday night they have live poetry with First Stop Poetry with Mona Lisa. And that starts every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. More acknowledgments to come later in the show. But as we are waiting for our guest, I wanted to, first of all, make a quick announcement about what the World Court of Women is. And we will be talking about that next week in depth with Sherry Honk-ala. World Courts of Women to visit the United States over poverty issues. It's very timely given the government shutdown. As the government shutdown and sequestration cuts impact the most vulnerable in America, testimonies of people living in poverty will challenge the dominant narratives. October 18th through the 20th, 2013, the International World Courts of Women will be held in Kensington, Philadelphia. Hosting the courts will be the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, a coalition of grassroots organizations, community groups, and nonprofit organizations committed to uniting the poor across color lines as the basis for a broad movement to abolish poverty. The World Court of Women in Philadelphia will feature public hearings documenting the personal testimonies of struggle and survival from women and people in general living in poverty in America. Traveling from several cities, they are scheduled to testify in front of a panel of prominent local and national jurors in order to break the silence on poverty as a violation of both women's rights and human rights. Quote, just as the slave narratives were critical for abolitionists in ending legal slavery, it is necessary for us modern poverty abolitionists to share the stories of those affected by the violent conditions produced by poverty, says Sherry Honk-ala, director of PPERC. The World Court of Women coming to Philadelphia is timely. The government shutdown and the ongoing sequestration cuts to vital programs for the poor, such as food stamps, WIC, and Head Start, harm those at the furthest margins of society as poverty continues to rise even higher than official government measurements, according to some experts. The World Court of Women began in 1992, and there have been 37 courts held worldwide. The World Courts of Women on Poverty will be held again at West Kensington Ministries at Norris Square in Philadelphia, October 18th through the 20th. If you want more information, go to economichumanrights.org. And we, any moment, are going to be having a call from a special guest that Mark already spoke of. Just to give a quick introduction, his name, again, is Diop Ulugbala. He's also known, as he likes to call his slave name, Wally Rahman.
Slave name?
Well, that's his original name,
wow.
And he has changed his name, and it reflects his change in feelings about the colonialization of Africans as well as other nationalities in this country.
So it's like Cassius Clay and Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, very similar. He's the president of the International Democratic People's Uhuru Movement, and on September 25th in St. Petersburg, Florida, at approximately 4:45 p.m., he was arrested. What we know from witnesses is that Diop turned the corner of 13th Street and 15th Avenue South in St. Petersburg riding a bicycle. He was stopped by a woman cop and interrogated. She said he was being detained but would not say why. Other members of the Uhuru came to the scene, which is 3 blocks from the Uhuru House. When the other members demanded to know what was he being detained for, the cops refused to answer. The cops arrogantly told Diop to come over to the car. When Diop told the cops to come to him, they came up and grabbed him, pushed him against the car, and arrested him for reasons that are still not clear. And this is a frequent practice that we know as racial profiling, and it happens all over the country, of course, but it's happened quite frequently in our own backyard. St. Petersburg, where at least Mark and I are from, but we know it happens all over the country.
Now, have there been any official charges filed?
That's the funny thing about it. They couldn't seem to find a charge. They finally came up with obstruction of justice, which seems to be a favorite.
Obstruction of justice?
Yes.
Any details on that rather broad charge?
Yeah, exactly. Interestingly enough, we'll be sharing more about that later. I do believe our guest is on the phone now, and I want to go immediately to that. Diop, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How's it going, Bruce?
Oh, wonderful to have you here. I'm here with my co-host, Mark, and really, really glad to have you on to talk. And I do want to say Uhuru, which is African for freedom. Is that correct?
Yes. And for freedom.
And Diop Olugbala, that's how you pronounce your name, correct?
Correct. Olugbala.
Olugbala. Well, it's nice to meet you. This is Mark, the co-host of Spectrum 360. Glad to have you on the air. Tell us about your case.
Well, my case, first I just want to be clear that my case is not unlike that which hundreds and thousands of young African men and women are facing in Pinellas County, and
yes.
Certainly thousands around the country. I was riding my bicycle down the street on my way actually from the Uhuru House, where I was doing some work, and on my way home when I was approached by a cop named Jenna Price. She rolled up next to me, demanded to know my name. I asked her if I'm legally required to give her my name. She says yes, so I tell her my name. Then she pulls me over and demands to see my ID. At this point, I understand after years of doing this type of work that there are certain legal, quote-unquote, rights that are afforded to U.S. citizens, although it's debatable as to whether or not African people are really citizens, but that's another question. But,
wow, that's quite a statement.
Yeah, well,
this is supposed to be a free country with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, supposedly, but, the interaction I had with Jenna Price was an indication of a different type of reality that African people face in this country. And so when she demanded to see my ID, I knew that in most states, including Florida, the only way that a cop is able to demand your ID, according to the law, is if you are actually being detained. And the only reason for being detained, the only legitimate reason for detaining somebody would be if you had so-called reasonable suspicion or probable cause to search them. And,
did the officers state that they had either of those, probable cause or reasonable suspicion? Did they explain your detention to you?
Not at all. And this whole interaction was captured on videotape. There's a YouTube video that you can find on uhurunews.com. That
would you repeat that again? uhurunews.com?
Yes, uhurunews.com. UHURU news.com. So anyway, she demands to see my ID. I ask her, am I being detained? She says, after it looks literally, when you look at her facial expression as she's being asked the question, it's clear that she had never been asked that question by somebody that she was harassing before in that community. So it took her off guard. And after a few seconds of having to think about it, she said, yes, you're being detained. So then I demanded to know why I'm being detained. Do you have probable cause or reasonable suspicion? Do you have any evidence that would indicate that I've been involved in what you call a crime? And she didn't have any real response to those questions. So I'm protesting my detainment and, kind of action I'm protesting. At this point, people...
I think we're losing the signal on the call.
What's that?
We were losing your signal for a second.
We just briefly lost the signal on the call. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, so sorry. Is that better?
It was.
Okay. So sorry about that. Is that cool?
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm protesting the entire situation. People start to come out of their homes. They see and hear what's going on.
Really?
And they pull out their camera phones and, get the whole thing on tape. And so, at this point...
It became became a neighborhood spectacle at that point, correct?
Yeah, at that point it became a neighborhood spectacle, yes. So at that point, I get on the phone because the Uhuru House is just blocks away. So I called other members of the Uhuru movement, to come to the scene because this police officer is harassing me, and I want the organization to be aware so that we can, respond accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So other members of the Hula movement show up, and at this point, there's at least 30 people out in the streets. And when Jenna Price realizes that she's not going to be able to just, railroad me the way she's used to doing African men in the neighborhood, she gets on her CB radio and calls for backup. And about, within seconds, one car, rolls up, and then down the street, you can see another car coming with its lights on, its siren lights on, and in its pursuit of locking up another African, runs a stop sign and literally hits somebody from the oncoming traffic. So and this is like everyday occurrence in the African community.
Okay, was this a pedestrian or was it a vehicle that the police cruiser hit?
Vehicle, a car that was driving down the street that had the right of way. The police car ran the stop sign and therefore hit the car that had the right of way.
Wow.
So,
my gosh, it's one thing after another out there, right?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was crazy. So at that point, Jenna Price and her partner stuffed me, put me in handcuffs and stuffed me in the police cop car, and I'm taken to the St. Petersburg Police Department headquarters, where they make me sit in the back of the car for about an hour and a half, and I can see the police, Jenna Price and the other cops, conferencing amongst each other, surely to try to figure out a way to get out of this one, because they've clearly just...
Whoa. We lost you again.
Well, there apparently was no reasonable suspicion or probable cause, and I want to compliment you because you handle yourself very well in a situation like that. A lot of people get flustered or don't know their rights, and I think you asserted your rights in a respectful but also in a way that you have a right to do, and it's the onus is on the police to prove that they had any kind of evidence that you committed any kind of crime or had a reasonable suspicion or a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Yeah, and Diop, this is a common occurrence, is it not? I mean, obviously we know about the recent Trayvon thing, and naturally what's come out about Zimmerman and the sinister kind of character he really is. You mentioned how routine this is, and I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think that's important to underscore that it's such a routine thing, unfortunately, now in communities of color, particularly the African community, but it happens in Latino communities as well. And
Native American
and
communities?
Native, yes.
Asian communities?
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this? I mean, I know I'm a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Committee, and so I know that the Uhuru has been at the forefront of dealing with police harassment and containment, and naturally in St. Petersburg, unfortunately, there's been several shootings of young black youth, most famously Tyron Lewis and the uprisings that happened as a result. But tell us, I mean, this obviously is something that is routine, and I'm sure, unfortunately, you've probably experienced something like this.
Could we characterize this as bicycling while black?
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that, because first of all, I just want to be clear that I just come into St. Petersburg 4 days prior to the stop, which is an indication of just how intense the warfare that's being waged against the African community is. If you can, as a young African man, it doesn't take but 4 days to be stopped by the police for riding down the street on a bicycle. That's an indication of just how intense this military occupation of the community is. And the reason why I say that it's more than just being a case of driving while riding this bike while black is because we're looking at more than just racial profiling or some type of glitch in, police policy, so to speak. But we're looking at a particular type of relationship that the police have with the African community in St. Pete that really approximates to more like a military, colonial military occupation than it does one of crime fighting or, serving and protecting the population of that community. What happened to me is reminiscent of what the U.S. Marines do in Afghanistan and roadblocks, checkpoints they have there. or the Gaza Strip in Palestine that is enforced by the Israeli military. We're looking at a colonial occupation of the African community by a foreign and hostile military force in the form of the St. Petersburg police.
Mm-hmm.
And the stop that I experienced was a tactic used by the police to maintain a particular sentiment amongst the people, amongst the population in the African community, a sentiment of fear and feeling of a state of terror and a feeling like you are being held hostage in your own community. And I do also just want to point to the material basis for this type of activity by the police. Just as the U.S. Marines and military occupies Afghanistan and other parts of the Middle East and the world to facilitate the theft of resources of the people who are indigenous to those territories, the police function in the African community essentially to keep African people from having the ability to get organized to claim control of our communities on a political level and also to control our economic lives as well. We would be remiss if we did not speak to the tremendous amounts of wealth that is generated not only off of the prison industry, but also off of other aspects of economic activity associated with the police occupation, including the drug economy itself. So we're looking at a military occupation that at its deepest core, has a material and economic basis. And that's something that's very important for us to draw out in this discussion.
Well, Diop, I want to thank you for being very articulate. You really explained the situation and your perspective on it very well, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, and Diop, I just want to reiterate again the importance of recognizing this. Many of us are talking more and more about the whole militarized police state that has become our country, and it has existed for years within communities of color, particularly the African community and Native community. For more information, where can people go? You there?
I want to encourage all of your listeners to certainly learn more about the analysis and work of the Uhuru movement. You can go to uhurunews.com. That's UHURU news.com, and you can see a lot of similar analysis on questions that confronting African people, not only in St. Petersburg, but around the world. And I also just want to call on everybody to attend the Court for Black Justice and Reparations that the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement here in St. Petersburg.
Diop, we're losing you again.
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. I just want to encourage your listeners to also
Wow, we lost you again.
organized by the St. Petersburg International Movement through the Court for Black Justice and Reparations. We will be putting the St. Petersburg Police Department, and particularly crime, colonial genocide, be waged against the African community.
Okay, well, we're losing the signal here. Diop, I think we're going to wrap this up.
But yes, again, thank you so much. And again, go to Uhuru News, as he mentioned, uhurunews.com, and there is going to be a conference coming up dealing with the whole issue of reparations. And again, thank you for your just sharing very, very important information with us, Diop. Sorry about some of the connection issues. Diop was calling us from the Midwest in Chicago, and so sometimes reception, particularly with certain cell phones, are difficult there. So thanks again.
Thanks, I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. We'll probably have some people on in the future again from the Uhuru. Thanks again.
All right, Bruce. Thank you.
All right. Uhuru. That was Diop Ulugbala, and he's president of the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. And Mark's got another segment to share with us. Mark, what's up next?
Well, I want to continue speaking about the new film that was just released entitled Inequality for All, which features Robert Reich, Rhodes Scholar, an official in the Ford, Carter, and Clinton administrations, a friend of Bill Clinton's, and also...
And don't hold that against him. He's brilliant, by the way. Robert Reich is brilliant.
And his last name was actually pronounced Reich.
Yes, you're
And,
going to say it right.
You hear it. Yeah.
All right.
Well, it is heard both ways. Some people say Reich, some people say Reich, but it's actually Reich. That's how he pronounces it himself. And I've got
good thing he's not the Third Reich.
I've got the trailer for the film. I'd like to play this for you, and this will explain a little bit more about the film.
Now, the thing you ought to know about this Mini Cooper is it is small. We are in proportion, me and my car. My name is Robert Reich. I was Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton. Before that, the Carter administration. Before that, I was a special aide to Abraham Lincoln. Of all developed nations, the United States has the most unequal distribution of income, and we're surging toward even greater inequality. 1928 and 2007 become the peak years for income concentration. It looks like a suspension bridge.
Last year we made $36,000.
I probably make $50,000 a year, working 70 hours a week.
The middle class is struggling. Now, people occasionally say to me, what nation does it better? The answer is the United States. In the decades after World War II, the economy boomed, but you had very low inequality.
Do you know Robert Reich?
I do indeed.
He's a communist.
When I was a kid, bigger boys would pick on me. I think it changed my life. I had to protect people from the people who would beat them up economically. Who is actually looking out for the American worker? The answer is nobody. If workers don't have power, if they don't have a voice, their wages and benefits start eroding. We are losing equal opportunity in America. Any one of you who feels cynical, just consider where we have been.
Let me just say that's such a relevant film given the current guest we just had, as well as Sherry Honkla coming next week. Seems like the issue of poverty, inequality, and racial injustice is coming to the forefront again, and that sounds like an exciting film, Mark. We also know that next week the Fifth Estate is coming out, which is about Julian Assange. So it seems like there's a lot of public attention being given to this. Naturally, everybody is thinking about it given the government shutdown. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine today that was going to Social Security to try to get a new card, and people were standing in line to get services, and there just wasn't the staff there to do it. Some even volunteered.
Okay, yes, I do recommend the film. It's playing at the Burns Court Cinema in downtown Sarasota, and it will be coming to other theaters as well in the future weeks and months. I highly recommend it. You should go see it. We're going to take a break for about 5 minutes for news and commercials, et cetera, et cetera. We'll come back on the other side with more Spectrum 360.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
And the war of words continues.
There's not a subject that I am not willing to engage in, work on, negotiate, and come up with common sense compromises on. We're not going to negotiate under the threat of a prolonged shutdown.
Now, the American people expect when their leaders have differences, and we're in a time of crisis, that we'll sit down and at least have a conversation. Really, Mr. President, it's time to have that conversation.
But as we hear now from NBC's Chuck Todd, that conversation did not take place today.
The government shutdown showdown is nothing compared to the potential economic peril if political leaders don't agree to raise the nation's debt ceiling in the coming weeks. And without action by Congress, it would mean the government couldn't borrow money to pay bills like Social Security or even interest on the debt.
This is NBC News Radio.
Have you ever wondered what a sex surrogate does? Well, I have, so I'm going to talk to one and ask some questions, and you can too. Join me on Thursday, October 10th at 3 p.m. for Happy Hour with Dana Pepper. Call in and ask some questions of your own. I mean, it's sex education from a practicing sex surrogate. You know you're going to have some questions. Happy Hour with Dana Pepper every Thursday afternoon at 3 on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
For all your home repair needs, call Ed's Handyman Services at 727-224-8681. For example, toilets, faucet, door locks, and much, much more. Impeccable quality work and reliable real-time service at an astonishing affordable price. Ed provides a clean, safe work environment from start to finish. Licensed, bonded, and insured, Ed guarantees all his work. So call Ed now at 727-224-8681.
Need a tow? Call Jimmy's 24-hour towing and recovery service in Clearwater. Serving the Bay Area with quality and pride since 1972. They offer 24-hour towing, collision repair, and cash for junk cars. Jimmy's Towing and Recovery, 1101 Seminole Street in Clearwater. Call them at 727-442-5883. That's 727-442-5883 for Jimmy's Towing and Recovery in Clearwater.
Hi, this is John Austin, host of the Book Club on the Tan Talk Radio Network, and I've been telling you about a book that can change your life. The book is No Cash, No Problem by Dave Wagenford, who is one of the greatest barter experts in the world, and his co-author, Ali Pervez. Well, it turns out that a whole lot of people agreed with me. Just check out the reviews on Amazon, where the Kindle edition of the book has been #1 in its categories for the last 5 weeks. Do you want to remodel your house, but the cost is just too high? Or maybe there's an automobile that you have dreamed of owning, but thought you could never afford. This book will tell you how you can do both of these things, plus hundreds more with little or no cash, and without going into hock for the rest of your life. Maybe you're a business owner with a cash flow problem that leads to low or non-existent profits. Read this book and see how you can increase your cash flow and your profits by time-proven techniques. The book, again, is No Cash, No Problem, and you can buy it now on Amazon for just $4.49 for the ebook. Do yourself a big favor and buy it today.
We're talking to Eric Serene, who's been with Bill Dawson at Best Services for 27 years. They're the official air conditioning service of the Tan Talk Radio Network for more than 20 years. We all have air conditioners, and when it gets hot, there's a lot of problems with them because they haven't turned them on for a long time. Why should they call Best Services, Bill?
We provide 24-hour service, and obviously our guys have the experience and the expertise to provide quality service, and we're known for our honesty, integrity. You know, a lot of people could say that, but no,
that's really important.
It really is.
We're talking to Eric Serene with Bill Dawson at Best Services. They have 24-hour emergency service. Here's how you reach them. In Pinellas, it's 727-773-0151. In Pasco, the number is 842, also 727-842-3357. Let me give you their website, bestserviceshvac.com. bestserviceshvac.com. WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.
From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
This is Spectrum 360. This is Mark Skogman with Bruce Wright. Remember to like us on Facebook. We like those likes. Like us as much as you can.
Like us, please. Like us.
Yes, we like all
we
people.
Like to be
want
liked.
to be liked. Okay, our next segment. Features an interview with Mark Adams. Mark Adams is an election reform activist. Also, he is a former lawyer. The reason I say that is because he was disbarred because of some of his activism against corruption in Pinellas County courts, the very county where we're broadcasting from now.
Say it isn't so.
And I wish it wasn't so, but
Yes,
it's actually the truth. Excuse me. He's a great person, a great activist, and he's been doing excellent work on elections and elections fraud. He has brought cases for a number of people, including Clint Curtis, John Russell, and Max Lynn, who was a former candidate for governor. So he's been very active in the legal front on this issue. I'm going to speak just briefly about his organization, Project Vote Count. I'm going to give you a description of this here, and then we're going to have an 8-minute interview with Mark Adams. Project Vote Count, here's a description. One thing that we all should be able to agree upon is that we must be able to make sure that our votes are counted accurately. Right now, it is difficult to know whether our votes are counted accurately because our votes are counted in secret on computers. Let me underscore that. As most
and
of
we
you know,
trust computers, don't we?
No, not in this case. As most of you know, there is abundant evidence that these computers have not worked very well in the last several elections, and that's an understatement.
Yeah.
There is evidence that thousands of votes have not been counted, and evidence which indicates that votes may have been stolen. And we actually proved that in Pasco County in 2006. And full disclosure notice, I was active with Mark Adams and a number of other activists, and we did a canvassing which Mark Adams will describe for you, and we proved that at least in a couple of elections in 2006, there was election, not voter fraud, election fraud in Pasco County, I'm sorry to say. So, we're going to have Mark Adams tell you more about that, and we'll be back after this great interview with Mark Adams. This is Mark Skogman. I'm here at the Unity in Action Summit Conference in Shady Hills, Florida. And today is Saturday, the 5th of October. I'm here with Mark Adams, who was a presenter at the conference. And I want to ask you, Mark, what did you speak about today? And give us some of the details about your talk today.
Well, Mark, I spoke about the fact that right now our votes are counted in secret, and that's unconstitutional. And, of course, counting votes in secret is inherently dangerous.
And you've been working on this for a few to several years now, is that correct?
Right. I first got asked to look into election issues in 2006 by Clint Curtis and John Russell. And so I represented them, and we found evidence showing that at least 14% of the votes cast for Clint Curtis and John Russell weren't counted for them, but were instead flipped over to the Republican. And that evidence was affidavits from voters who we know voted based on the fact that we looked at the poll registers to see who voted in several precincts, and then we canvassed those voters, asked them to sign affidavits, and the totals came up to be considerably different than the official secret vote count.
What year were those elections that were audited?
Those were 2006. We contested them, and the Florida State Court ignored a U.S. Supreme Court case saying that it did have jurisdiction to allow a contest of the count and dismissed the case, and the U.S. House of Representatives ignored the Federal Election Contest Act and dismissed our challenges without hearing any evidence.
Wow. Now, you've got a project online. Is that Project Vote Count? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Project Vote Count, basically that was started in 2008 just to raise awareness about the fact that the votes are counted in secret now. They're counted on computers. You can watch your computer all day long. You don't know how it's counting. Okay? You just have to... Right, it's garbage in, garbage out. You know, it's whatever the programmer says to tally the count as is how it works. And unfortunately, like we found in 2006, there's a certain amount of votes that are automatically flipped by the program from one candidate to the other. In 2008, what we found is that a third of the votes cast for Ron Paul in Florida were not counted for him, but were flipped to John McCain.
So not only is there election fraud in the election results themselves, but they're being counted in an unconstitutional way, which allows for the opportunity to commit the fraud.
Correct, yeah. I mean, it's like Stalin said. Those who cast the votes decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything.
Yes, I understand the point. And I also saw you speaking about foreclosures. You covered that in your talk as well?
Right. I talked about all of the fundamental rights that once gave us the power to secure liberty and justice, and how they've all been eroded. Obviously, like we just talked about, the votes are counted in secret now. That's unconstitutional, specifically prohibited by the constitutions of 7 states. It's prohibited by 3 U.S. Supreme Court decisions. Yet that's how they're counted now.
Do you know what the years were for those Supreme Court decisions regarding the vote counts?
They're on my flyer. The last one was 1964. Right. And so, and in that decision, that was the 3rd time the U.S. Supreme Court said the right to vote includes not only the right to cast the ballot, but the right to make sure it's counted accurately. And obviously, you can't make sure it's counted accurately if it's not counted in public. If it's counted in secret, you just have to take whoever does the counting's word for it. And right now, the person doing the counting is a computer programmer for one of 3 corporations that make and program all the computers that count votes throughout America now.
So what's the solution to this situation where we've got an unconstitutional vote counting method, and then we have election fraud in addition to that because of the way the votes are counted? How can we solve this problem?
Well, it's really very simple. You get rid of the computers, you go back to casting votes on paper and counting those in public at the precinct so people can witness how the votes are counted. They can witness that the tally is correct. And then, of course, some people have to pay attention at the county level to make sure the tallies from the precinct are recorded correctly. And then some people have to pay attention at the state level. And people used to do that. The news media used to do that. Certainly now it's the alternative media that might think about doing it. The mainstream media won't even talk about the fact the votes are counted in secret. They're keeping that a secret from the public.
Well, there are organizations like Video the Vote, etc., that have done some activism on those issues. But do you think that's adequate to solve the problem?
No, unfortunately, most of the organizations which claim to be looking to establish fair elections do not talk about the fact that votes are counted in secret and do not talk about the fact that it's unconstitutional. And so I think really most of them are serving more as a distraction, trying to keep people confused. And obviously, maybe some of these groups don't realize it yet, that the votes are counted in secret. Maybe they don't realize that that's unconstitutional. But I mean, if I was going to start an election reform organization, I would look into that. I mean, I really hadn't thought about elections or election contests until 2006. And, I spent a few days looking into it and found out relatively quickly that, unfortunately, Florida does not have a constitutional provision requiring the votes to be counted in public. But I had found the U.S. Supreme Court decisions, and then later on started looking at state constitutions and found, right now I've looked at about half the state constitutions, and there's 7 of them that either prohibit the votes from being counted in secret or require the votes to be counted in public.
And that does not include Florida, correct?
That does not include Florida. Once again, the Supreme Court decisions say the right to vote includes not only the right to cast the ballot, but the right to make sure it's counted accurately. And you can't do that when it's counted in secret. So in other words, you have to have a public count in order to fulfill the U.S. Supreme Court's requirement of the right to vote. And this goes back to the time of the founding of our country. Votes were cast much like in the Democratic caucuses in Iowa. They're cast in public at the founding of our country by saying, everybody for George Washington stand over here. Okay? And so everybody could observe who had the biggest crowd. Everybody could observe as the crowd was counted off.
And that's still done in the Iowa caucuses, I believe. Is that correct?
It still is done in the Iowa caucus. And unfortunately, the only other place that the votes are counted in public is there's a handful of counties in New Hampshire, which is one of the states that in the Constitution requires the votes to be counted in public, that still resist using computers and still count the votes in public. Other than that, they're counted in secret everywhere.
Okay, great. Mark Adams, thank you for speaking with Spectrum 360.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow. That was Mark Adams.
Great interview, Mark.
Yes. Mark Adams is dynamite. He's great. He's very knowledgeable. He holds a Juris Doctor degree, which means he's a lawyer. And he also holds a Master of Business Administration degree, too. So he's a businessman and a lawyer.
We should call that segment Mark on Mark.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, Mark on Mark. And Mark Adams's organization has a website. It's www.projectvotecount.com. And I must say that the Florida Unity and Action Summit Conference was predominantly a right-wing event. There were a lot of conservatives there, libertarians and Republicans. And philosophically, I'm a progressive, but I have to recognize that a lot of these right-wing people that are at this event are doing some very good work, such as PANDA, People Against the NDAA, and the NDAA obviously stands for National Defense Authorization Act. That's a great organization. Project Vote Count, Personhood Florida, Oath Keepers, Liberty First Network. There's a number of things that conservatives and liberals, progressives and moderates can agree on. Florida Cannabis Action Network. So there was a lot of good work that was done there. I certainly
Did they give samples?
Yes, I've got samples. Also, Floridians Against
Promise
Real
we're not
ID.
doing it here in the studio right now.
And also the Fully Informed Jury Association. So there were a number of great organizations out there that are doing very good work.
Fully informed juries? Boy, they should have been there to help with the whole Zimmerman case.
Well, yeah, absolutely. In fact, there were some people there that were doing exactly that work to people that were outside the courthouse during the George Zimmerman trial. That's exactly the case. There were some people there that were doing that kind of work. So that wraps up that segment, and I believe we have some more announcements, and we're going to go to our segment 3 of our John Nichols speech.
Yes, there's some other people we'd like to thank, or organizations. We'd like to thank Relax at Home, licensed massage therapist. You can call Patricia.
You did it again.
Massage. I can't say massage.
You did it again.
I have a massage for you. Wasn't that Peter Sellers in the Pink Panther? I have a massage for you. He meant message, but anyway. Yes, licensed massage therapist.
Yes, he did it. He did
blah,
it.
Blah, blah. And call Patricia. Does a great job. Check her out. Call her 813-784-7485. And then My Place in Recovery Thrift Store and Recovery Program. That's located at 1450 First Avenue North. And the thrift store benefits recovering addicts, veterans, and the homeless. And you can reach them at 727-244-0427. Of course, the Catholic Worker in St. Petersburg. You can check them out on Facebook or reach them at 727-278-1547. And then, of course, the League of Revolutionaries for New America. That's LRNA.org. And we'll be sharing one last comment towards the end of the show to remind people about our guest next week and that upcoming event regarding the World Court of Women. And now to our next segment, which I believe is John Nichols, correct?
Yes. John Nichols is a correspondent for the Nation magazine and also the Progressive magazine, and also In These Times is the associate editor of the Capital Times, the newspaper in Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital of Wisconsin. He spoke to the Progressive Democrats of America at an event on the 10th of August, a Saturday, in Madison, Wisconsin, at right downtown. And this is our latest segment. We're going to have this segment and then one more in the next program. That's going to wrap up our coverage of the John Nichols speech. John Nichols, great speaker. We got about 10 more minutes for him.
I promise you, you only have to do this once, and you never have to do it again. Go watch your evening news tonight. Do you know what they're going to do? It's going to start up, and they're going to say, welcome to the evening news. The United States and Russia are recreating the Cold War. Obama's not going to go meet with Putin. We've got, 8% unemployment, except if you're black, and then it's 15% unemployment. Except if you live in a city, and then it's 25% unemployment. Except if you're under 50, and then it's 50% unemployment. It's like, we got this huge unemployment thing. He says, but we can't really talk about that because we've got to get straight to the weather. I'm not kidding you. No matter what happened, the weather guy is sitting right there, and the weather guy is going to say, well, it's sunny outside and a mild day in August. We'll be back in a few minutes with all the details. Then they go to commercials. Then they give you a little bit of health tips and exercise. Don't take this pill unless the company says to, and then tell your doctor you need it. And then when that's all done, right? Then in Scott Walker, you can picture Scott Walker like opening a tourism bureau, right? So that people who come to see where jobs used to be can look at it. So then they get that, and they come to the weather, and the weather guy comes on, and he goes, hey, this is incredible. It's 77 today. Tonight, it's going to be in the 60s. Tomorrow, it's going to be in the 70s. The next day, it's going to be in the 70s. But here's the interesting thing. In Wauwatosa, today, it hit 69. Whereas in Milwaukee, it was 71. No, you don't. It's only when we talk about it that you see the absurdity of it. They actually go around a map of the area, right? And they go in top. Down in Racine, it was 68. Whoa, but up in Mequon, it was 69. And you're sort of like, who really cares? Who could possibly care? How can you tell 68 from 69 anyway? And the only difference between Racine and Mequon is Racine actually elects better people to the state legislature than Mequon. So, that's the weather. And then the amazing thing is, right, that when they actually do things, they get into detail of the weather that they would never get into on politics. They never get into on governance. They're actually like high-pressure systems coming at you. There's a high-pressure system developing over the Pacific that might in weeks from now affect us. And does anybody really know what high pressure is? I have no idea, but I know a lot about it, right? I mean, I will guarantee you, the average American knows more about high-pressure systems than they do about trade policies that have shut factories in their hometowns and caused layoffs in their communities. The average American knows more about the humidity than they do about the Pentagon budget that is literally robbing us of the resources to educate our children and provide health care to Americans. And that is a dysfunctional media system that does not sustain democracy but actually undermines it. And so, if that's where we begin, if that's where we're headed on this thing, then let's think about this for a minute. If the media doesn't begin to inform us, and if the advertising, because of Citizens United and all the decisions that have come in recent years have been supercharged to a level that we've never seen before in the history of the Republic, we spend more on politics now than ever before. In the book, we detail this, that in Washington, they say that the 2012 election cycle cost us $6 billion. $6 billion. But they're wrong. Because Washington doesn't care about anything outside Washington. So they don't cover local and state elections or referendums or anything like that. In the book, we actually go through all the costs of our politics. The 2012 election cost us more than $10 billion. More than $10 billion. And yet, an overwhelming portion of that money, of that more than $10 billion that flowed through our system from our local elections to the presidency, through all of our politics, an overwhelming proportion of it came from fewer than 1,000 people. A handful of very, very wealthy Americans who literally get to buy the process. They get to define what the issues are. And people say, oh, well, Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney's money. No, he didn't. Barack Obama raised almost as much money as Mitt Romney. Barack Obama was a better candidate than Mitt Romney. He was a better person in many ways, I happen to think. But the bottom line is it was money versus money. And you know what the crisis is? While I think many of us can accept that we may like Barack Obama better than Mitt Romney, when Barack Obama gets elected, we get a whole bunch of Mitt Romney policies. And that's where the dollarocracy prevails. That's where the dollarocracy dominates. Even when you elect a good person, you end up with the politics of the people that pay for the process. And this is a crisis in America because when the media does not serve us, and when the money is supercharged to such a level, we have created the perfect circumstance for a propaganda state. We've created the perfect circumstance for telling us what we can talk about, not requiring us. It's not like dictatorship or anything like that. No, but we just feed us more and more information about what the real issues are. And you know what the real issue in America right now is? Well, it's got to be the deficit, right? It's the debt deficit. That's unbelievable. Oh my gosh, we're overwhelmed by debt and deficits. It's the only thing you could possibly think about, except for one thing. Barack Obama's actually been very fiscally conservative. The debt and the deficits are going down. You know, they don't say that. They actually don't mention. The fact is, it's actually been reduced. And they also don't mention that the only way that any country has ever gotten out of a debt and deficit situation is by spending money on job creation. Huge infusions of money. Job creation. That's how you do it. And yet, the debate is so warped that when look at, I'll give you one other example of how, when we talk about all this stuff in the book, how this happens, how you end up with a situation where the money power defines the debate and the people power is non-functional. It's just the vote is so dismissed. I'll give you the perfect example. We don't need to look far, brothers and sisters. Look at Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan, one of the greatest cities in the United States. Detroit, Michigan, a city where, in some of the factories, they had to have people, they had to be able to communicate in more than 40 different languages. Because every immigrant who came to America, 1900 to 1920, they came to Detroit because Detroit built things. Detroit did things. And the one group of people in those factories who could always speak good English, who could always, kind of help everybody else communicate, black people came up from the South, because when you came out of that segregated South and you got to Detroit, Michigan, you joined a trade union, and that union said you were an equal human being to everybody else in that factory. If you're a black man and a black woman, you got to leave because you were a part of the union. Before they gave, if you can imagine this in a republic, they gave votes to African Americans. There were African Americans running things in factories because they had worked their way up under a union contract that said you can't discriminate. The United Auto Workers Union, the United Steel Workers Union. These were CIO unions that said from the start, we're not going to be part of the segregationist lie. We're going to be part of the small D democratic process of America. The union is incredible. Those great factories. I used to cover Detroit. I would drive into Detroit. I'm sorry, I apologize. I am an environmentalist. I want to address global warming. But when I came into Detroit at night and I saw those smokestacks and the fire kind of coming out of the smokestacks and sort of that incredible light of an industrial city at night, I loved it. Because I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the fact of the matter is, a working, humming factory town. Yeah, I want to get rid of the pollution. I want to make it work. But I loved the tens of thousands.
That was John Nichols, segment 3 of the speech that I recorded of John Nichols in Madison, Wisconsin, this year on August 10th, a Saturday, in downtown Madison at the Madison Concourse Hotel. Great speech. We're going to have the wrap-up final segment 4 of that speech next week's program, and we're going to take it from there. This has been Spectrum 360 for Monday, the 7th of October, 2013. And Bruce, any comments?
Yeah, don't forget, next week we are also going to be speaking with Sherry Honkala, former vice presidential candidate for the Green Party and director of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign. We will be speaking about the World Court of Women to take place in Philly a week from this Friday.
Okay. Like us on Facebook. This has been Spectrum 360.
And check out our podcasts.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.
For all your home repair needs, call Ed's Handyman Services at 727-224-8681. For example, toilets, faucet, door locks, and much, much more. Impeccable quality work and reliable real-time service at an astonishing affordable price. Ed provides a clean, safe work environment from start to finish. Licensed, bonded, and insured, Ed guarantees all his work. So call Ed now at 727-224-8681.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.